My name is Everett Aldridge. I'm 45 years old, and for the past 22 years I've been a civil engineer in Tacoma, Washington. I built bridges. I designed roads. I stabilized foundations that other people said couldn't be saved. My work was precise, methodical, and earned me a reputation for staying calm under pressure. At home, I carried that same energy. Quiet, steady, present. I invested time, care, and every dollar I earned into a life I shared with my wife, Lorna. We'd been married for 14 years. I never asked for praise. I just expected loyalty. That expectation cost me everything. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. It started in February of 2024, during a routine inspection on a highway expansion project outside the city. I was checking a retaining wall when my foot slipped on loose gravel. I fell hard, and when I tried to catch myself, my right shoulder took the full impact. The pain was immediate and sharp. By the time I got to the ER at Multicare Tacoma General, the doctor was already talking about torn ligaments and months of recovery. I was placed on temporary medical leave. No field work, no heavy lifting, just physical therapy 3 times a week, and a lot of sitting around at home. That's when Lorna took over. "Let me handle the finances for now," she said one evening, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "You need to focus on healing. Just trust me, Everett." I did. I trusted her completely. She took control of our joint accounts, managed the bills, and handled everything while I tried to get my shoulder back to functional. I spent my days doing exercises with resistance bands, icing my arm, and watching her move through the house with a strange new energy. She was busier than usual, more distracted. She'd leave the room to take phone calls, saying it was just work stuff or a friend going through something. I noticed the changes, but I didn't question them. I was too focused on my own recovery, too tired from the pain and the frustration of not being able to work. I thought she was just stressed. I thought she was carrying the weight because I couldn't. I was wrong. In late April of 2024, I received an email. The subject line read, "We need to talk about the future." It was from Lorna, not a text, not a conversation over dinner, an email. I opened it, and attached was a PDF, a petition for divorce. No warning, no discussion, just a legal document with her signature already on it, alongside a settlement agreement she called fair. I sat there staring at the screen for what felt like an hour. My hands were shaking. I scrolled through the document. She'd already sold our house. She'd changed the passwords to our bank accounts. According to the agreement, I was entitled to a 2005 Honda Accord with a dented bumper and whatever personal belongings I could fit into a suitcase. That was it. 14 years of marriage, reduced to 2 pages of legal jargon and a car that barely started. When I tried calling her, she didn't pick up. I sent texts. Nothing. Finally, she replied, "This is for the best. Sign the papers, Everett. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I didn't understand. I didn't know what I'd done wrong. I thought maybe the injury had been too much for her. Maybe she couldn't handle the uncertainty of my career. Maybe I'd failed her somehow without realizing it. So I signed. I signed because I was exhausted, isolated, and drowning in disbelief. I signed because I thought I had no other choice. 2 weeks later, in early May, I was standing in the driveway of what used to be my home, holding a duffel bag and the keys to that beaten-down Accord. Lorna stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, watching me leave. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her expression said everything. I was already gone to her. I had been for a long time. I drove to a Motel 6 on the edge of town and paid for 3 nights with the last of the cash I had in my wallet. When that ran out, I started sleeping in the car. I parked behind a Chevron gas station on Pacific Avenue, the kind of place where no one asks questions and no one looks too closely. I'd wake up stiff, my shoulder throbbing, and spend the day trying to figure out how my life had collapsed so completely in less than 6 months. That's where I was the morning everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning in late May, around 7:30. I'd just woken up in the back seat of the Accord, my neck stiff and my shoulder aching from the awkward position I'd slept in. I was rubbing my eyes when I noticed a man standing a few feet from the car, looking directly at me. He was in his mid-50s, wearing a charcoal suit that looked expensive, holding a leather briefcase. He didn't look like someone who belonged behind a gas station at dawn. I rolled down the window halfway, cautious. "Can I help you?" I asked. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "Are you Everett Aldridge, son of Margaret Aldridge, formerly Margaret Brennan?" I hesitated. My mother had passed away when I was 12. I barely remembered her maiden name. "Yeah," I said slowly. "That's me." "Why?" The man reached into his briefcase and pulled out a business card. "My name is Howard Levine. I'm an estate attorney based in Portland. I've been trying to locate you for several weeks now. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" I stepped out of the car, confused and slightly suspicious. "Talk about what?" "Your mother had a half-brother," he said, "a man named Douglas Brennan. He passed away in early March in Beaverton, Oregon. He never married, had no children, and left a will naming you as his sole beneficiary. The estate has been through probate, and you're entitled to the proceeds." I stared at him. "I don't know any Douglas Brennan." "That's not uncommon," Levine said calmly. "He was estranged from the family for decades. But the will is legitimate, and probate has cleared. The estate is valued at approximately $128,000. It includes a small savings account, a paid-off condo that was recently sold, and some municipal bonds. The funds are currently being held in escrow, pending your confirmation of identity." I felt like I'd been hit in the chest. $128,000. It wasn't life-changing money in the grand scheme of things, but for someone sleeping in a car behind a gas station, it was a lifeline. It was air. It was time. "What do I need to do?" I asked. Levine handed me a folder. "Sign these forms. Provide a copy of your ID and your mother's death certificate if you still have it. I can help you obtain it if not. Once everything's verified, the funds will be transferred to an account of your choosing within 10 to 15 business days." I took the folder with shaking hands. "Why didn't you just call me?" "I tried," he said. "The phone number on file was disconnected. The mailing address led to a house that had been sold. I had to track down employment records and eventually found you through the state database for professional engineers. When that address also came back as sold, I started checking local motels and, well, here we are." I nodded slowly, still processing. "Thank you," I said. "I'll get this done today." He shook my hand. "Good luck, Mr. Aldridge." 2.5 weeks later, in mid-June of 2024, I had $128,000 sitting in a new checking account I'd opened at a credit union in Olympia. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post about it. I didn't celebrate. I just sat in a rented room at an extended stay hotel and stared at the balance on my phone screen, thinking about what came next. That's when I started to see clearly. I thought about Lorna, about how quickly she'd moved, about how prepared she'd been, about the timing of everything, the injury, the financial takeover, the divorce, the sale of the house. It was too smooth, too coordinated. So I started digging. I bought a refurbished laptop from a computer repair shop in Olympia and logged into every old email account I still had access to. I searched for anything related to our house, our finances, our life together, and that's when I found it. Buried in a spam folder was an automated receipt from a title company, dated 3 weeks before the divorce email. It showed the sale of our house, $412,000. Recent comps in our neighborhood had been selling between $580 and $610 for similar 3-bedroom homes. That meant she'd sold our house almost $200,000 below market value. The buyer was listed as Kerr Holdings, LLC. I didn't recognize the name, but I remembered something. A man who'd come to the house twice during my recovery, someone Lorna introduced as a real estate consultant. She'd hired to assess our options in case I couldn't return to work. His name was Brandon Kerr. I ran a search on Kerr Holdings, LLC. It was registered in Vancouver, Washington, just across the state line. The listed agent was a woman named Angela Kerr. I ran her name next. LinkedIn showed she worked as an office manager for a property development firm. Her profile picture showed her standing next to a man at a charity event in 2023. The caption read, "Great evening with my brother Brandon." I sat back and let it sink in. Lorna had sold our house to her lover's shell company, almost $200,000 below value, and I'd signed away my rights to contest it because I was too broken and too trusting to question anything. I didn't get angry. I got methodical. I went to a FedEx office in Tacoma and printed every bank statement, every email, every receipt I could recover from our shared accounts. I documented every transaction Lorna had made in the months leading up to the divorce. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, payments to contractors I'd never hired, cash withdrawals that didn't match any expense I could identify. I built a timeline, cross-referenced it with public records, and started connecting dots. Then I hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I found a family law attorney in Seattle named Judith Ramos, someone with a reputation for taking on bad faith divorces and winning. Her initial retainer was $8,000. I paid it without hesitation. I sat in her office on a rainy afternoon in late June and laid out everything I had. The emails, the bank records, the sale documents, the LLC connection, the comparable sales data showing the undervaluation. Judith listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she looked up at me. "This is fraud," she said simply. "Concealment of assets, undervaluation of marital property, breach of fiduciary duty, possible collusion. You have grounds to reopen the case. It won't be fast and it won't be easy, but you have a legitimate shot at getting this overturned." "How long?" I asked. 4 to 6 months minimum, possibly longer depending on how much they fight and how backed up the court calendar is. But if what you're showing me holds up an extended discovery, they won't have much room to maneuver. "Then let's do it," I said. Judith filed a motion to set aside the divorce decree on the grounds of fraud, material misrepresentation, and breach of fiduciary duty. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing for late August. In the meantime, I kept my head down. I didn't contact Lorna. I didn't confront Brandon. I just waited and let the legal system do what it was designed to do. When the summons was served in mid-July, Lorna called me for the first time in months. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Everett, what the hell are you doing? We had an agreement. You can't just—" I deleted it halfway through. She sent texts over the following days. "We need to talk. This is going to hurt you more than it hurts me. You're making a huge mistake." I never responded. Judith told me not to, and I trusted her. Every message Lorna sent, every attempt to manipulate or intimidate, just became more documentation, more evidence of someone desperate to keep a lie from unraveling. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for August 23rd at the Pierce County Superior Court. I showed up early, wearing a suit I'd bought at a thrift store in Olympia, and had tailored to fit properly. It wasn't expensive, but it was clean and professional. I wanted to look like someone who had his life together, even if I was still rebuilding it piece by piece. Lorna arrived 10 minutes late with her attorney, a man in his 60s named Gerald Hastings. She looked different, thinner. Her hair was shorter, styled in a way that seemed like she was trying too hard. She glanced at me once as she walked past, and I saw something flicker across her face. Not guilt, not regret. Just irritation, like I was an inconvenience she'd thought she'd already dealt with. Brandon Kerr wasn't there. That told me everything I needed to know. The hearing started with Judith presenting our motion. She walked the judge through the timeline, the financial records, the sale of the house, and the connection between Lorna and Kerr Holdings LLC. She submitted copies of the bank transfers, the title documents, the business registration showing Angela Kerr as the registered agent, and the comparative market analysis demonstrating the significant undervaluation. Every piece of evidence was labeled, dated, and cross-referenced. Hastings objected repeatedly, calling the motion speculative and an attempt to relitigate a settled matter. But when the judge asked him to explain the sale price of the house relative to market comps, he stumbled. When asked about the relationship between Lorna and Brandon Kerr, he said, My client was receiving professional real estate advice during a difficult time. Professional advice that resulted in a sale nearly $200,000 below comparable properties to a company owned by the advisor's family? Judith asked calmly. Hastings didn't have an answer. The judge, a woman in her early 50s named Sandra Ortiz, reviewed the documents in silence for what felt like an eternity. Then she looked up. "I'm ordering full financial discovery," she said. "Both parties are to provide complete banking records, correspondence, and any documentation related to the sale of the marital home. This will be an extended discovery period given the complexity of the allegations. We'll reconvene for a substantive hearing in early October." Lorna's face went pale. Over the next 6 weeks, everything came apart for her. Discovery revealed text messages between Lorna and Brandon going back to early 2023, long before my injury. Messages talking about finally being free and starting fresh. Messages where Brandon outlined how to structure the sale to minimize scrutiny. Messages where Lorna commented about me being too trusting to notice. It also revealed that Brandon had flipped the house. 3 months after buying it through Kerr Holdings for $412,000, he listed it again for $585,000. It sold in 2 weeks. After closing costs and a minimal cosmetic refresh, he'd netted over $140,000 in profit on a property that was supposed to be marital assets. And Lorna had walked away with just enough to look clean in the divorce. But the worst part, the part that sealed everything, was the email Judith found buried in Lorna's Gmail account. It was from Brandon, dated 2 weeks before the divorce petition was filed. The subject line was just one word: timeline. The body of the email read, "Let's move fast. He's too out of it to fight back right now. File next week, close the house by the end of the month. Once it's done, we're clear." Lorna had replied, "Agreed. He won't see it coming." And when we returned to court in early October of 2024, Hastings tried to argue that the messages were taken out of context, that the sale was legitimate, and that any profit from the resale had nothing to do with Lorna. Judge Ortiz didn't buy it. "Ms. Aldridge," she said, looking directly at Lorna, "you knowingly participated in the undervaluation and sale of marital property to benefit a third party with whom you had a personal relationship. You concealed this relationship during the divorce proceedings, and you misrepresented the nature of the transaction to your spouse. During marriage, both parties owe each other a fiduciary duty of full disclosure. You violated that duty. That constitutes fraud and material misrepresentation." She turned to Hastings. "Your client engaged in deliberate misconduct. This court is setting aside the original divorce decree and the settlement agreement. We will be scheduling a new hearing to determine an equitable distribution of assets, including any proceeds from the resale of the home." Lorna's hands were shaking. She tried to say something, but Hastings put a hand on her arm and shook his head. The judge wasn't finished. "Additionally, I'm referring the documentation related to Kerr Holdings LLC and Mr. Brandon Kerr's conduct to the Washington State Department of Licensing for independent review. If Mr. Kerr engaged in fraudulent real estate practices, that's a separate regulatory matter that will need to be addressed through the appropriate channels." I sat there, silent, as the judge outlined the next steps. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just listened. Outside the courtroom, Lorna tried to approach me. "Everett, please," she said. "Can we just talk for a minute?" I looked at her for a long moment. I thought about everything she'd taken from me. The house. The savings. The 14 years I'd invested in a marriage I thought was real. But more than that, I thought about the man I'd been when I signed those papers in April, broken and desperate, and willing to believe I deserved nothing. "No," I said quietly. "We're done talking." I walked away. Judith followed, and as we reached the elevator, she turned to me. "You did good in there," she said. "You stayed calm. You stayed focused. That's what won this." "It's not over yet," I said. "No," she agreed. "But the hardest part is." The final settlement hearing took place in mid-December of 2024. By then, The Washington State Department of Licensing had launched a formal investigation into Brandon Kerr's business practices. His real estate license was suspended pending the outcome. Kerr Holdings LLC was being audited for potential violations of real estate disclosure laws, and Lorna had burned through most of her remaining money trying to mount a defense that was falling apart. The judge ruled in my favor. I was awarded 50% of the net proceeds from the resale of the house, which came out to just over $75,000 after legal fees, back taxes, and capital gains adjustments were settled. I was also awarded reimbursement for the value of the joint accounts Lorna had drained, another $32,000. In total, I walked away with $107,000 on top of the inheritance I'd already received. But the money wasn't the point. The point was that she'd been exposed. The point was that her plan had failed. The point was that I hadn't let her get away with it. Lorna left the courthouse without looking at me. Her attorney told Judith later that she was planning to move out of state, that staying in Washington had become untenable for her. I didn't care where she went. She wasn't my problem anymore. Brandon's situation got worse. The investigation found that he'd used similar tactics with at least 3 other properties over the past 5 years, buying undervalued homes from distressed sellers and flipping them for significant profit without disclosing his personal connections to the transactions. His license was revoked permanently in February of 2025. The last I heard, he was working as a property manager for a storage facility in Vancouver. As for me, I didn't stick around Tacoma. There was nothing left for me there. I took the settlement money, combined it with what remained of the inheritance, and moved to Eugene, Oregon in early 2025. It was quieter, calmer, a place where I could start over without constantly looking over my shoulder. I reactivated my professional engineering license and opened a small consulting firm specializing in structural assessments and forensic engineering. The work was steady, and I liked the independence. I wasn't building bridges anymore, but I was helping people understand why buildings failed, why foundations cracked, why things fell apart. There was a strange kind of poetry in that. I bought a small house on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy. Just a 2-bedroom with a workshop in the garage and a view of the hills. I adopted a dog from the local shelter, a mutt named Copper who had been abandoned by his previous owners. We understood each other. Some nights I sit on the back porch and think about everything that happened, about Lorna, about Brandon, about how close I came to losing everything permanently, and I realize that the inheritance, the lawyer, the evidence, all of it would have meant nothing if I hadn't been willing to fight. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with patience, precision, and a refusal to accept injustice as inevitable. I didn't destroy Lorna. I didn't have to. I just held up a mirror and let her see exactly who she was. The rest took care of itself. People ask me sometimes if I regret how things turned out, if I wish I'd handled it differently, if I'm bitter about the years I lost or the trust that was broken. The answer is no, not anymore. What happened to me taught me something I don't think I would have learned any other way, that silence can be more powerful than rage, that patience can be more devastating than confrontation, and that the truth, when handled correctly, doesn't need to be shouted. It just needs to be revealed at the right time, in the right way, to the right people. Lorna wanted me to disappear quietly. She wanted me to accept the narrative she'd written, where I was the broken man who couldn't keep up, and she was the pragmatic woman who had to move on. And for a while I played that role. I signed the papers, I left the house, I slept in a car behind a gas station, but I never stopped watching. I never stopped taking notes, and when the moment came, I didn't fight with emotion. I fought with documentation. That's the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is loud, it's messy. It's about making someone hurt the way you hurt. Justice is quiet, it's methodical. It's about making sure the scales balance no matter how long it takes. I didn't destroy Lorna out of spite. I didn't ruin Brandon because I hated him. I simply made sure that what they'd done was visible. I made sure the people with the power to hold them accountable had all the information they needed. After that, The consequences were inevitable. They built the trap themselves. I just made sure they walked into it. By the time I settled in Eugene, I was a different person. Not harder, exactly, but clearer. I knew what I was worth. I knew what I wouldn't tolerate. And I knew that the people who underestimate quiet men are the ones who get blindsided the hardest. My business grew steadily over the first several months. Word spread in the local construction and real estate communities that I was thorough, honest, and didn't cut corners. I worked on everything from pre-purchase inspections for nervous home buyers to litigation support for contractors being sued over structural failures. The work was satisfying in a way my old job never had been. I wasn't just following blueprints anymore. I was solving problems. I was finding answers that other people missed. One afternoon in late summer of 2025, about 8 months after moving to Eugene, I got a call from a potential client in Portland, a woman named Rebecca Marsh. She explained that she was going through a divorce and suspected her husband was hiding assets. She'd heard about me through a real estate attorney I'd worked with on a previous case. "I don't know who else to trust," she said. "Everyone tells me to just accept the offer and move on, but I know something isn't right. I can feel it." I listened to her story. It sounded familiar. Too familiar. A controlling spouse, financial secrecy, pressure to settle quickly. I told her I'd look into it. It took me 2 weeks to track down what her husband had been hiding. A series of property investments made through a trust he'd set up in his brother's name. Investments that had been funded with marital money, but were conveniently left off the financial disclosures he'd submitted to the court. I documented everything, wrote a detailed report, and sent it to her attorney. 3 months later, Rebecca called me again. "We won," she said.